session was bank failures. Okay, and so we're really going to like settle into this depression. Okay, and so we'll kind of do some, descriptive talk about what's going on, how it affects society, the economy, and so forth, and the world. And just kind of work through it. And we'll look at, Hoover's reaction and what he wants to do to try and help. What he's limited what he's going to do. So, yeah, let's just go. Okay, you guys seen this picture before? It's in every history book. Okay, because it won the Pulitzer Prize, I think, in 1932 for photography. Okay, it's called Migrant Worker. All right. And so if you look at this, really?
Good morning. Okay, our winners, we have leftover winners from first hour that still have not come down. It would be Mincy Wynn, Kaylin St. Vrain, Kira Ronsick, Ethan Stuckey, Alan Cabrera, Diego Benzor, Zane McHugh, and Paul Schoenfeld. Our winners for this hour are Quade Harris, Elaine Tran, Luke Timmermeyer, Chloe Sheffman, Eric Huerta, James Georges, Austin Solenki, Timothy Wagner, and Marissa Millett. And our staff winner today is Father Andrew Bergkamp. Congratulations, come on down.
Come on down. All right. So, see, a picture tells 1,000 words, right? So you have this woman, she's kind of got a strong face and huddled there with her children. You can kind of like imagine what's going through her mind, like how did we get here, or where do I go from here? How do I feed my kids? That kind of thing. So that's, sometimes a photograph can capture a time period, and that's kind of the most famous from the Depression. Okay. So as factory owners can't sell their products, we see a slowdown in production, which leads to layoffs, or a shutdown in production, which means there's fewer people, right? They can't buy things. A lot of them have lost their savings in the banks, okay? That statistic, 9 million individual bank accounts wiped out. 25% of all the banks shut their doors, okay? So depression will be here, and it will spread around the world, okay? There's no country that isn't affected, okay? So by 1932, guys, we have 12 million Americans that are unemployed, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Okay, so a lot of people that do have work are only working part-time. Do any of you guys live in Colwich? You live in Colwich? Mm-hmm. There's a grocery store out there. What's it called? Krause's or just Kraus?
Kraus Grocery.
Kraus Grocery. Now, how many employees do you think they got there?
I don't know.
10?
10 at the most.
Yeah, so let's say it's 1929, they have 10 people. The Depression sets in, and not as many people are buying as much from Kraus. It's just they're slowing down. So Kraus says, I got to lay some people off. So, but everybody knows everybody in Colwich, right? I mean, these are like friends, their family, their neighbors, right? And they don't want to like lay these people off and leave them with nothing. So instead of laying off half their employees, they make all 10 part-time, just so that they have some type of income to maybe keep a roof over their head, to feed their families. So when we look at unemployment numbers here, guys, this doesn't tell the whole story. Okay, and this is about 25% unemployment. Okay, 12 million Americans, because we say 120, 130 million Americans at the time. Not all of them are working age and so forth. Okay, and then what Hoover called the greatest tragedy of the Great Depression was homelessness. Okay, and if you think about it, it is people losing the roof over their head. Something that they may have invested. If you have a 30-year mortgage, you may have invested 20 years into this house, but you can no longer pay the mortgage. And you get an eviction notice. Now, some people aren't going to want to leave. So they're going to have to call the sheriff. Okay, and if you think about small communities like Colwich and somebody can't pay their mortgage or the mortgage on their farm, and the sheriff has got to come and evict them. Okay, this is really hard. there's in that movie, I come back to this because Cinderella Man does a really good job. This movie does a really good job of showing how this affected individuals during the Depression. At one point in this movie, the manager for the boxer that's going through a lot of hard times himself, the manager, they go to his apartment and it's just an apartment. All the furniture's gone. They've sold the furniture just to keep the roof over their head. Okay? And a lot of people did that. They sold everything. And then, a lot of times they would, if they got evicted, they would basically have an estate sale right there on the front porch and sell everything that the people own. And they would get that money, but that would be it. So it'd just be the people showing up and paying not much money for your furniture and stuff like that. So this is a really difficult time for people. And when they didn't have anywhere to go, they would show up in empty lots, vacant lots, buildings, and so forth. This is pictures actually taken in Central Park in New York City. It's a Hooverville, okay? And in the movie Cinderella Man, there's actually, they go down into the Hooverville in this Central Park, and this is where they're talking about the Reds, okay? Because, guys, for a lot of people, the Depression sets forth an era called democratic malaise, where people feel like democracy has failed, capitalism has failed, and they need to look to different, more radical ideas so that they can feed their family. You know what I mean? And so this is where you start to see, the ideas of communism and fascism, kind of in the well springs of that in these Hoovervilles. Okay, and there were riots and fights that broke out and all kinds of things. Okay, so we'll talk about farms a little bit more on the next slide. So marriage rates are going to drop by 1/3. College enrollment will sink. People can't start a family. They don't have money to. And then there's hunger. I guess there was no shortage of food in this country. In fact, we had an abundance of food. It's just a lot of people didn't have any money to buy it. So nowhere have I ever read anything about during the Great Depression in America that anybody starved to death. There was no starvation, okay, but there was hunger. There was malnutrition. And when you're malnourished, you're more susceptible to different diseases like scoliosis, just rickets, all kinds of different things that you can, when you're not healthy, okay? And so, it's going to be really hard on people. Now, at the same time, guys, all this is in black and white, right? And I'm talking about the Depression, how awful it was. But at the same time, guys, I would say more than half the population, they have jobs. Some people are doing well. The country doesn't come to a standstill. You can kind of get locked into this idea that it's just like Armageddon. It's not. The country's still moving along. It's just a lot of people are suffering. Okay, so let's move forward here and kind of look at some more. I mentioned this earlier. We had talked about the bonus bill, the Adjusted Compensation Act. You remember this? Maybe? Okay, this is where they gave veterans $1.25 for every day they served overseas, $1 at home, and they could borrow 25% against that, maybe get a couple $100 to get on their feet. These policies for the Adjusted Compensation Act did not mature until 1945. Well, when the Depression hit, a lot of these veterans said, hey, the government needs to give us our money now. We're hurting. So there was a march on Washington, okay? And these are all veterans and their families. Now, some of these veterans had nowhere else to go. So, hey, I'm going to go to the Capitol to see if I can get my insurance policy. And a bill was going through Congress to give all these veterans $500, okay? And it was sponsored by, I forget the guy's name, Wright Patman, I think. And but the bill failed in Congress, okay? They didn't have the money in the Treasury to do it. So Hoover put them up in empty government buildings and stuff like that. They don't have money to stay in hotels. You know what I mean? So he's accommodating, sending food and stuff over. But after the bill fails, quite a few of them stay around because they got nowhere else to go. They stay in Washington. Well, some of them, they built a shanty town of Hooverville. Some of them start causing problems. There's riots, robberies, and stuff like that. So Hoover's going to call in the army. And this is tragic, actually, because some people are going to die. All right, Hoover calls in the army to deal with this. And I have a video I'll show you on it here in a second. And, well, let me just show you the other picture. This is, the army went in and burned down the shantytown to get them to leave. Okay. Fights broke out, shots are fired, tear gas, and so forth. Okay. And you can see the Capitol building in the background. Okay. The President of the United States just called out the United States Army, not on just the American people. He called out the United States Army on veterans of this country. The optics of this are not good. Okay. Now, the two of the main generals that, well, they weren't generals yet, but they were in charge of this, were two famous people. A guy named Douglas MacArthur, who would go on to be a general, and a guy named Dwight Eisenhower that would go on to be a general. Okay. They were actually in charge of this. But they had orders from the president. Okay. Now, before I show you that video, we're going to talk a little up here. Okay. So yes, there were hunger marches, there were riots, there was looting, violence, forced evictions, and then when you start talking about the family farm, okay, between 1930 and 34, 1 million family farms are lost. Now, how many people do you think lived on the average family farm in 1932? Maybe 10. I don't. You got mom, pa, right? Maybe grandma, grandpa, maybe a couple of them. The aunt that never married, all the kids that you have, and so forth, right? Okay. So let's be conservative. Say 7. Okay, that's 7 million people that are going to have to go somewhere else. Where are they going to go when they're evicted off their farm? Well, they're going to go to the cities, right? And a lot of them are going to go west. Okay, one of the, I used to show a movie in here when I first started teaching this class. There's a book, famous book by James Mitchell. Somebody can correct me here, I'm sure. The Grapes of Wrath. And you guys have to read that in middle school, The Grapes of Wrath? See the movie? Okay. I guess nobody's using it anymore. Okay, but it's said to be a great work of American literature, okay, about a family during the Depression from Oklahoma, okay? And there was a lot of promise of jobs in California. And most of those jobs were like picking fruit and stuff like that, like migrant work, but it's work and people wanted work. So yes, a lot of people did go to California, but because so many people heard about those jobs, when most people got out there, those jobs were already filled. You know what I mean? So, and the book talks about the mistreatment of the workers on these plantations and so forth. And the hero's government. I mean, it has a lot of socialist overtones in it and so forth. But anyhow, yeah, so people went to the cities. Okay, but let me just give you an example of how this could affect families. So let's say you're from Missouri, okay? You lose your farm and you're going west to California, okay? So you're driving through Wichita, all right? All you have is your car, your possessions on your car. And people have all kinds of stuff on their cars, you know what I mean? It's loaded up, all their possessions. And you get to Wichita. Well, the economy in Wichita is crap too. But these migrants keep coming through Wichita. Does Wichita want them to stay here? No, they're like, we don't have any jobs here. We can't help you. You need to go away. Like, you can pass through, but you're not staying here. I mean, you're not wanted here. And that's how it was all the way, across the country. People were hopping on railroad cars just to escape the situation they were in, not knowing, well, they might have known, but the situation wherever they were going was just as bad. Okay, and so it was a difficult situation for people. Okay, so let me show you a couple of videos here. I've got one on the Dust Bowl. Yeah, go ahead.
What happens if you owe the bank a mortgage on your house
Mhm.
and then those banks close?
I would imagine that's a good question. Like how does who owns the property now that the bank's closed? Man, would it be the owner of the bank that owns that property now? I guess wouldn't you have a situation where the banks would auction off the property or something like that?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, so I'm surprised that we didn't have a food shortage if all of the farms were lost and then, because nobody's working the land and it's not producing any food.
Well, not all the farms were lost. Okay, and when you lose some farms, then the farmers that are still around have a better opportunity to make money. You know what I mean? So there's less competition. Now, there's parts of the country where farming was devastated, like during the Dust Bowl, where you couldn't grow anything. But as being such a large nation, Iowa wasn't affected like Oklahoma was affected. So they're growing corn and wheat up there and so forth. And, if you've been to Nebraska or Iowa, that's all it is. You go to Omaha, driving up there through northern Kansas up in, it's crazy. It's just farmland. It's amazing. Okay. We shouldn't be too concerned about overpopulation in this country. We have a lot of open spaces, but anyhow, let me pull these up. These are pretty good little videos. All right, so let's watch the Dust Bowl first, and then we'll watch the veterans.
Then, to make matters even worse, drought, coupled with the overproduction of crops in the Great Plains, turned the area from Texas to Oklahoma into a dust bowl. In 1934, strong winds blew tons of dust from the plains all the way to the East Coast. Dust even coated New York City and settled on ships 500 miles out to sea in the Atlantic Ocean. Unemployment and poverty hurt everyone, especially children. Many left school to work and help their families survive, and many more went hungry and malnourished. Diet-related illnesses like rickets and scoliosis became all too common. Once again, President Hoover tried to reassure the nation by saying, recovery is just around the corner. But it was not to be, and more Americans grew disenchanted with his policies and administration. Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, echoed the beliefs of most of Hoover's advisors, that the economy would recover on its own. Hoover thought the government must take some action, but feared making government too strong, and so he chose a conservative approach, calling together business, banking, and labor leaders and urging them to work together and avoid laying off workers or calling strikes. Then he authorized the expenditure of federal funds for large public works projects, like Boulder Dam, later renamed Hoover Dam, to create jobs and wages for thousands of workers. Hoover felt giving direct help to needy Americans would undermine their self-respect and looked to private charities to help the hungry. Instead, he approved more than $2 billion in emergency financing to businesses, hoping their renewed success would trickle down to the people who needed assistance. It didn't. Rather, unemployment rose even higher, and Americans were caught in a web of despair.
And the Veterans March. The Bonus Army.
Americans, already tired of Hoover's pessimistic and cautious approach, then became outraged by his treatment of a group of World War I veterans in 1932. After the war, Congress issued veterans bonus certificates for their military service worth nearly $1,000 to be redeemed in 1945. Dismayed by the economic outlook of the time, the veterans demanded the immediate payment of their bonuses in full. In an attempt to satisfy their demand, Texas Congressman Wright Patman proposed a bill in which the government would immediately give veterans $500 in cash instead. To show their support of Patman's plan, between 10 and 20,000 veterans and their families peacefully marched to Washington, D.C. This so-called bonus army established a shanty town inside of the Capitol building. Hoover provided food and supplies for them, but when Congress vetoed the bill on June 17, he asked the bonus army to leave. Most left, but approximately 2,000 stayed behind, hoping to meet with Hoover. During a riot, Hoover ordered General Douglas MacArthur and the 12th Infantry Force to remove the veterans. Shocked Americans saw troops use bayonets and tear gas to force the vets to leave. In the melee, more than 1,000 people were gassed, an 8-year-old boy blinded, and an 11-month-old baby was killed. The shantytown burned to the ground. Public support for Hoover foundered, and with a chance to change direction, Americans overwhelmingly embraced a new president in Franklin Delano Roosevelt, popularly known as FDR.
Okay. Well, you can tell the Discovery Channel here is not very nice to Mr. Hoover. But anyhow, and he brought that on himself, I believe. There was a riot, and he called in the army. Now, that's rare. There's a lot to unpack there. Can you think of any other times in American history where the U.S. Army was called out, not the National Guard, the U.S. Army was called out against its own citizens? It just doesn't happen. Okay. Shays Rebellion? Yeah. What? Shays Rebellion?
Wasn't the U.S. Army?
It was,
It was
Massachusetts.
actually, the merchants of Boston hired vets from the Revolutionary War as a private army.
To stop Shay.
Whiskey Rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
They called out the army.
Yeah, Alexander Hamilton rode them out of Washington, D.C., but, I mean, when they got there was nobody. Everybody loved the whiskey tax. What are you talking about?
Then you've got Ohio. Now, that was the National Guard, but this one turned violent. Kent State. Kent State, you heard of Kent State, Ohio? Kent State University? Yeah, it was like 1972. They were having Vietnam War protests on the campus. And they'd been doing it for weeks, and eventually the university said no more. We're not doing this. We're going back to school. And so the protests started again. They called in the National Guard. Okay, so you've got 18, 19, 20, 22-year-olds, right, protesting on campus. And then you get the National Guard, which is made up of 18, 19, 20, 22-year-olds as well. You understand? And so they start using tear gas. They throw the tear gas back at the guard. And one of the soldiers opened fire. 9 people were shot. 4 died on the campus. Okay. I forget which student it was. Last semester, they had an interview with a family member that used to teach at Kent State. Okay. And so it's still a big deal. Like when that date rolls around, they have a memorial for, like a deal for, the students that died on campus. And, but that made Nixon look bad. You know what I mean? Even though it wasn't Nixon that ordered it, it was the Ohio governor that ordered it. But Neil Young wrote a song about it called Ohio. You guys heard that, hadn't you? Yeah.
So, the president have supreme authority over the National Guard?
He can put them into federal service, yes.
Okay, so like, there could never be a situation where a governor called in the National Guard and then the president then called in the army on that National Guard, you know what I mean?
We've never seen that, but, well, this happened in Little Rock, when they tried to integrate the schools. They had, the governor called in the National Guard to prevent violence from taking place, but then he used the National Guard to keep the black students out. And then a federal judge removed them from the governor, okay? And then eventually, Eisenhower sent in the 101st Airborne. He sent in the Army to integrate Little Rock Central High School. And they didn't parachute in, but they came in on truck with bayonets attached, you know what I mean? And it was, yeah, I mean, it was, that's what it took, you know? Now, Eisenhower did that because he was facing criticism, yeah, for not acting, and so he acted. Let me, I know you guys have heard of this song. So, okay, they kind of repeat the chorus there. You heard that before? Neil Young, formerly Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. One of the things I want to do when we get to like the Vietnam era is that, you know, some of the music, like we did with the 20s, some of the music from, you know, the counterculture, which is still being played on the airwaves today. But there's a couple other examples in American history. I don't know, you guys ever hear about Waco, Texas, the Branch Davidian compound, where, you know, it was a cult, and David Koresh was the cult leader and was stockpiling weapons. They had like a compound outside of Waco. Now, you have the Second Amendment right, but the FBI wanted to question him, and he said, don't come out here, or you're going to have a fight on your hands. And so there was this long standoff between the FBI, the ATF, and CNN was the only cable news network. So this is ratings. This is a ratings, you know, gold mine for CNN. So every day it was standoff, Waco, day 15. Standoff, Waco, day 25. Okay. And they've got they're zooming in on the compound. You got women and children living there and so forth. Well, on April 19th, and this would have been 1993, the Attorney General of the United States, Janet Reno, ordered the FBI and ATF into the compound. They used military helicopters. They used tanks. They went in. There was a fight. And one of the main buildings caught on fire. People, you know, innocent people burned to death and so forth. Okay. That was on April 19th. What were they going for? They were going for Koresh's guns. okay? April 19th, 1993. April 19th, 1775. The British went out to Lexington and Concord looking for what? Weapons. Stockpile of weapons that Sam Adams and John Hancock had put out there. Okay? This is the reason that Timothy McVeigh claims on April 19th he blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City, 1995. Okay? It was the government coming after the citizens, just like the British did. Now the Clinton administration is doing it, and he was going to exact revenge against the federal government by blowing up the federal building in Oklahoma City. Okay? What the son of a, what he did was kill a lot of innocent people, including children. You know what I mean? But Janet Reno maybe should have known her history a little bit better and maybe not chosen April 19th for that day. The optics there are not very good, but still no excuse for what Timothy McVeigh did.
What did Janet? She did what
On April 19th, that's when she ordered the FBI and ATF to go into the Branch Davidian compound. That's, when those people died that were there. Yeah.
What's the significance of April 19th?
Same day as Lexington and Concord,
Oh,
April
okay.
19th. Okay. So when that day rolls around every year, I get an email from Coach Lawbon. It's April 19th. Okay. There's been some pretty significant events to happen on that date in American history. Okay. Those 3 dates, those 3 April 19th. Talked about family farms. I tried to do a Google search over your question about what failed banks do, and I couldn't. I'd have to dig deeper. So Hoover, he's going to run for re-election in 1932, and it's not going to go well for him. Okay, one guy sent him a telegram and said to President Hoover, vote for Roosevelt, make it unanimous. Okay, so yes, it was somewhat of a landslide on that one. Okay, but like I said, historians are rough on Hoover. Okay, and those are the 2 videos I showed you there. Okay. There was another. Yeah. Hang on a second. Okay, well, I'll hold off on that video for a little bit. Sorry. What is going on here? Okay, Hoover tries to help, okay? So what is he willing to do? And I mentioned this in the lecture yesterday, is that the key word with Hoover is loan, okay? He will loan people business, he'll loan money to people, but he's not going to give you something for nothing. Now, we talk about public works. So by 1930, the government started building stuff, and it would hire unemployed workers to build. This is construction work with your hands and so forth. Okay, so famously, Boulder Dam, which we now call Hoover Dam. Okay, which is a huge dam on the Colorado River. Okay, so by the end of his term, $2 billion spent on public works programs. So public, again, meaning government, works, meaning jobs. These are government jobs. Okay. When we get to Roosevelt, FDR, you're going to see a ton of this. Okay. So this is, $2 billion is not pennies here. Okay. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation sent $2 billion in loans to banks, railroads, other businesses to help keep them afloat, save those jobs, and that is, in a sense, it's not so much a bailout, it's a loan. Okay, so when we talked in government class about the bailout for the big banks in 2009, okay, the banks did pay that back. Okay, so he's straying a little bit from his conservative values here. Okay, now when you look at these public works jobs, by 1930, did they have bulldozers? They did, okay? They had tractors and bulldozers and so forth. But as you can see, these guys are all pushing wheelbarrows. Okay, this work could have probably been done differently, but these men wanted work. They didn't care what the work was, they just wanted work. You understand? Nothing is beneath these people to do. You know what I mean? You have a lot of Americans today, like, I'd rather collect unemployment than go get a job at McDonald's. Okay, that's beneath me. Okay, not for these people. They would have taken a job at McDonald's. You know what I mean? So this is dignity. There's dignity in work. You know what I mean? These people don't want to be on welfare. Not that there is any at this point. Okay, but they'll take a job. Give me a job, I'll work. Okay. Now this one's interesting. The Federal Home Loan Bank Act. Okay, and this is trying to help people from losing their homes. Okay, so basically, what they're going to do is start backing up loans. The federal government's going to start backing up banks and loans. Okay, putting some money forward to prevent foreclosures. Okay, we're going to see a lot more of this under Roosevelt as well. Okay, these are not massive programs, but what he's trying to do is help. Obviously, historians don't think he did enough. So here are his limitations, right? He refused to give money directly to the individual. So from the federal government, we're not going to give money directly to people. Okay, he's felt that this was dangerous to get people addicted to federal money. He said it would injure the spiritual response of the American people. Now, this would be the last president of the United States that actually governs this way. Everything's changed since then, okay? Do you agree? I mean, does Hoover have a point? Like, if once we start these welfare programs and give people money for nothing, that it's going to damage them in the long run? Do welfare programs, do they work? Do they help people? Yes, they work in the sense that they feed you, but does it help you get back on the right path to where you can feed yourself? Or does it make people dependent? You know what I mean? That's one of the big, worldview differences that people have. All right. Well, Hoover's going to be the last one to really govern like that. Okay. Now, you can see these dust storms, yes? You guys took Kansas history in middle school, right? Yeah. So you heard stories about this, right? Like you could not keep this stuff out of your house, Did you guys ever study about the locust infestations of like the 1880s in Kansas? I took this class in college called Kansas history. Okay, and here's just give me a little tip. Are we about on time?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, give you a little tip when you go to college. If the book you're using for your college class is written by the professor, find a different professor. Holy cow. So the professor I had at Wichita State for Kansas history literally wrote 9 different books on Kansas history. Okay, and we had to use like 4 of them for his class that he wrote, which means he's going to expect you to know way more information than you should probably know. It was one of the hardest classes I ever took. Dr. Miner, rest in peace, he's passed on, but wonderful historian, really hard class. But anyhow, he told the story about these grasshoppers that came to Kansas in the 1880s. I think it was 81 to 83. And it looked like a snowstorm because this breed had like a white belly on it, and they would just come in by the hundreds of millions, and they would eat everything. Like if you had a wooden shovel handle, right? They would eat the wood, the fences, they'd eat everything. Okay, it was horrible. He said I think it was 1883, they had an early freeze. And these grasshoppers would migrate back towards Colorado, and a huge early freeze came through and killed most of the grasshoppers. So that went away for a few years. But you guys know in the summer around here, you get those grasshoppers in your yard. jumping around, flying around. You ever get hit in the face by one of those things? Yeah, I mean, can you imagine hundreds of millions of these descending on your house? It's awful. The Dust Bowl, I mean, it's crazy, this stuff. And it would just, the wind would pick it up and it would go. As the video showed, the dust would go over to the Atlantic, to New York City and so forth. Okay, this was massive. So I have a video. Yeah, we'll end with this. This is in color. Now the proper name for a dust storm is a haboob. Okay. This is in Arizona a couple years ago. Love the music. Middle of the day. Yeah, there's quite a few good haboob videos on YouTube. So, yeah. Yeah, that was brutal. Okay, I'll pick up from there. Look, guys, I think I'm gonna finish the notes Monday, Tuesday. Okay, so review sheet is on Canvas. So you might start looking over that a little bit. I'm thinking next Thursday and Friday, we're gonna test over 17 and 18, module 17 and 18, yes. And some of you guys are doing the retreat.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so you can decide if you want to take it early on Wednesday, you can. If you want to wait till Wednesday at lunch, you know what I mean? Like just stay, let's see, Monday at lunch or Tuesday. Like Monday at lunch, you either come early, but you would be coming early, right? Because Monday, your afternoon. Yes, you guys? So you could come early. I'll be in here for the entire lunch period. You could take it then if you're going to miss for freshman retreat. Does that sound okay? Okay. And I'll tip you guys off on what to expect on the first test, what kind of questions. The review sheet's good. I've tipped you off on some things that I said you'd need to be able to write about on the test during the lectures, try to tip you off on that. So, yeah. So maybe this weekend, look over your notes a couple times, okay? You guys have a great weekend.